Hello everyone, and welcome to this session where we're going to be working on tuples. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to go to your Anaconda prompt. You should be able to open that up now. I'm going to go on my D drive because that's where my files are saved, and I'm going to cd to GitHub satellite image analysis. I'm going to conda activate SEER, and then I'm going to press Jupyter Notebook. So what I did was I basically went to where my files are saved, I activated the Conda environment, and then once I've activated the Conda environment, what I did was I opened Jupyter Notebook by just typing that command, okay? Now that we're here, I'm able to go into Notebooks. Currently I'm on week 3, and today in this session we're going to look at tuples, okay? So you can work through this with your own version, and there's going to be an exercise at the end which you need to complete, please. So tuples, essentially these are our lists. Okay, so you remember that we covered lists in the previous session, so they have square brackets, but this time tuples actually are just going to have round brackets, so normal, fairly normal rounded brackets. As you see here, there's an example of my tuple. But the key difference is that whereas with lists you're able to very easily kind of write over information within that structure and also edit the order of that structure, lists are actually immutable. What we mean by this is that they're basically fixed, they're not easily changed, okay? So essentially we have an example of our tuple just here, and it's very different to either a list or dictionary, okay? So a list uses these square brackets, a dictionary, which I'll cover later, uses these curly brackets. So when I look at a data structure like this, I'm often going to say that's a tuple, or that's a list, or that's a dictionary, and I know because of the shape of the actual brackets, okay? And this is going to really serve you well if you learn this, because whenever you have to look at computing in the next 30 years, just a standard data structure, you're going to know exactly what these different data structures are, and that's really important. So we can basically create a tuple as we've done here. We've gone open bracket, and then we put 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. There's a numeric, and essentially then we've closed it with the round bracket, and we can get our tuple here when we reprint this to the console as 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. These don't just have to be numeric, they could be strings, okay? So I could change those as strings, and you can see that they've come up within quotes, so we know that these are characters, they're not numeric anymore. Okay, so you see here, this is green, this is numeric information, and this is a character string, which is red. Okay, so that's just Jupyter making it a bit handy for you to have a little bit of additional color variation, rather than just you needing to look specifically at whether these are in quotes or not. So that's how we get our first tuple that we've created. Now let's have a go at indexing, okay? So here what we've done is we've said C, and then we've gone for square brackets. And when you have a square bracket straight after the name of a list or a dict like this, what we're doing is we're indexing. That means we're going into the numerical structure, in this case, of the tuple, and we're saying we want to get a piece of information which is at the third index location, okay? And the tricky thing to remember, of course, is that, as I covered last time, zero indexing means that the index starts at 0, so we go 0, 1, 2, 3, and at the third position, when we're zero indexing, we get this fourth piece of data in our tuple, which is 40, okay? So you can see we go C, we index at the point 3 within our tuple, okay? So you just need to remember that it's going to be 1 higher because of the zero indexing. So that might catch you out, but we'll cover it lots of times within our class so that you remember that zero indexing takes place within Python. Obviously, of course, those people who have worked with me on other classes where we've been using R might remember that R doesn't always zero index, and therefore you need to remember that there's some differences, minor differences, between different computer programming languages like this. So now let's try changing an element. So here we're going to attempt to overwrite the position, the fifth item that's in the fourth index position. I'm going to write over it with the value 100, and it's going to throw an error, and that is because we're not able to directly write over a tuple's content because a tuple is immutable. Okay, remember that word which you might not be familiar with, but essentially it means it's fixed. Okay, so it's basically saying tuple objects do not support item assignment, and it throws an error. Okay, so tuples are kind of handy, and we use tuples to do a variety of things. One of the nice Pythonic ways that we can unpack a tuple is that we're actually able to, for any number of items that we have on the right-hand side like this, we're actually able to basically left unpack those items as you can see here. So let's say we have this C tuple 10, 20, 30, that's equal to C. Then once we've got C, we're actually able to unpack those items to new variables on the left-hand side, okay, in one single very concise line. So this means that you don't have to go x equals C0 or y equals C1 or z equals C2. You can just basically say x, y, z equals C, and then you can have a look at what we are actually able to achieve from this. So here I've printed x, which is 10. We could also print y, which is 20, or we could print z. Okay. So hopefully that's reasonably clear to you. Shows how we're able to pack together groups of items into a tuple, allocate it to a variable named c, and then essentially we're able to unpack that tuple variable into a set of other variables, this time called x, y, and z. Okay, so we're able to package these items up and then unpack them very nicely. Okay, great, let's go on to the exercise now then. So hopefully you've been able to digest some of the information that I've put here. This particular session isn't very long. But what I want you to do is to actually have a go at what's here in the exercise, okay? So I don't want you just to kind of continue following this video and just see how Ed does it. I want you to actually have a go on your machine and attempt to carry out each of the questions that I've put here. And you remember, as I've said before, the reason why we do this is that you learn the most when you have a problem and you try to answer that question, and then maybe you get it wrong. And if you get it wrong, then when you find out the answer for how to do it correctly, that is basically scientifically demonstrated to be one of the most efficient ways for you to actually learn, okay? Because you might have a problem that you don't know how to solve. You're trying to work through those different solutions. Even if you get it wrong, you'll be able to correct your logic when you find out the answer eventually. So it's really important that you try these exercises, please. Okay. Great, hopefully you've had a chance to pause the video, okay? You've had a chance to pause the video and actually had a chance to have a go at these different exercise items. Now I'm going to show you basically how it's done, okay? So what we have here is we'd like to create a tuple. So I'm going to first name my tuple name. So here we're going to call it my _tuple. We're going to allocate it to this variable name by pressing equals. Obviously this is a tuple, so we're going to use parentheses, brackets, standard parentheses, standard brackets, and I'm going to allocate it to the items that we want, and it's just these numeric items 6, 7, and 8. Okay, and then we should be able to enter that, and it's entered into the actual Jupyter notebook that we're running here, and then I've printed it again to the console, and it's just been printed down here, essentially demonstrating that our tuple has been created correctly. So hopefully you were able to get that answer. Now the thing here is what we'd like to do is we'd actually like to access this item of information here, the number 7. Okay, so you need to remember how we actually indexed into a tuple previously. So you remember that what we need to do is we need to actually state the name of the tuple first, so that's my tuple, and then to index into it we need our square brackets. Okay, so this is not a list does contain square brackets, but here we've got the square brackets just to the right of the name of that data structure. And what we're going to do in order to actually get this, this value here is we're going to put in the right index location, all right? So remember, we start with a 0 index location, which is 6, and then the first index location is 7. So we're going to put my tuple 1 here, and it's actually going to get that, that value 7. I think the key point is that we did want to actually allocate this to a variable name, and we didn't manage to achieve that yet, so I'm going to put my item 1 equals my tuple. And hopefully you've now been able to see how this answer is correctly produced. So we've allocated that one item of information, number 7, which is in the first index position, to this my item 1 variable name, okay? And we've printed that to the console. Great. Let's do that again. Now this time we want to get the index number 6, which is at the 0 location position. So let's say that we want to get my item 2 equals my tuple. We're going to index, so we need the square brackets, and it's at the first location, so we need a 0. Okay, so hopefully you managed to get that answer there. So we managed to allocate 6 to my item 2. Okay, now what we want to do is we actually want to create a new tuple using the items in index location 1 and 2 in my tuple. Okay, so we're going to go my new tuple, we're going to make it equal to, and this time we want to make a new tuple, so we're going to need to create parentheses, and then we need to put in those 2 items of information that we want. Okay, so the index locations 1 and 2 will refer to 7 and 8, okay, in the original tuple. So let's go down here. 1, 2. And now when we print that, we end up with a new tuple called my new tuple, and it's containing that information, which was a index location 1 and index location 2. Okay. So just to round off this session, we know that we have my tuple just here. What I want you to do is basically attempt to unpack that into var1, var2, var3. Okay, so there's multiple ways to do that. You could do var1 equals my tuple 0. You could go var2 equals my tuple 1. We could go var3 equals my tuple 2. Now we could print var1, var2, var3, and we get 6, 7, and 8. And obviously that's the longer winded form. I wasn't necessarily looking for you to do it that way. The actual nicer way to do it is if you explicitly use that Pythonic unpacking which I covered earlier, where essentially we can unpack a tuple using an equals sign, providing we put enough variable names on the left-hand side which match up the internal contents of this tuple, and we can reproduce those results in a single one-liner. Okay, so before we had 3 lines in order to produce this. Here we're able to just unpack these 3 items in the tuple straight into our 3 variable names, var1, var2, and var3, and then we're able to print them and get those contents printed out 6, 7, and 8. Great, well I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was useful for you. Tuples are an important data structure which we're going to use within this class, so don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any further questions about this. Thank you, goodbye.